What up, fam? How we doing? All right, we're starting just about a minute late, but we've got all new people in AP HuG CRAM group. This is where it's at. So if you're new tonight, I'm Amanda. I am your host of AP Human Geography, and we've been having some fun. We've done Unit 1, we've done Unit 2, we've done Unit 3, which means we're 3 out of 5 units done. So if you've missed any of the past replays, they're all up there for you, all the slides as well. And yeah, man, this is gonna be dope. So really quick, in the chat, how you doing? You doing all right? How you feeling? Just like give me like a word or a little snippet, just like how's it going? And I'm gonna get set up. The slides are attached to the event. You can hit refresh if you can't see them. They're listed below so that you can follow along if you'd like. Me personally, I don't know. I've had kind of a hard week. I don't know. It's just like sometimes you like hit these moments, I think, that you're just, it's like like you like have all these moments where you're like, I'm fine, I'm chilling, I'm doing my stuff, I'm doing my homework, I'm staying busy, watching TV, I'm all good. And then like, I don't know, like out of nowhere, you'll have a day where you're just like, I don't know, I'm having like a little mental breakdown or something. I'm feeling hooped up, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling angry. I don't know, you just like feel all the things at once and then you just like don't want to do anything. So if you're feeling that or if you felt that, I get it. I hear you. I see you. That was the week I had. I don't know. The last 2 days I've just been like, I don't know. It's just been hard. So let yourself feel it. We're all dealing with a lot of trauma right now. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. It's a lot to process. We don't know what's going to happen next. So that's why we come together in our AP HuG CRAM sessions to support each other, like we're going to talk through content, but we're also just like here for each other. So just like I'm here for you, y'all are here for me too. I love, hanging out with y'all, and now we get to do it twice a week. Sorry about last night. I had made a mistake, and so that was on me. But from now on, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're going to hit the rest of the units and do a bunch of practice FRQs by the end, all the way leading up to May 12th, which is the day of your test. And the day before that will be live for like 5 hours with a couple of other students too. And just like every question, every issue, everything, we'll make sure to go over it. And I know that the Unit 4 study guide is not published yet. We've been, working our butts off, but that will come up, I promise. So I will post that. I will post that today. I will make you that. I will do it tonight. All good. Okay, so we're talking about politics tonight. I love this unit. I think maybe Unit 2 is my favorite, and then Unit 4. Because I just like love the like political landscape of things. And just to show you how excited I am, I even have a political shirt on that says November is coming, which I got when I was protesting at the Capitol during the Kavanaugh hearings. So just a fun little, historical artifact. Tell me in the chat on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being like, give me the test now, I got this, I love this unit. How do you feel about Unit 4? 1 being like, not good. Like, I don't even know what Unit 4 is. How do you feel about Unit 4, 1 through 5? And then I'll ask the same question at the end to get a sense of where you're at. And then I'm going to share my slides. And okay, so these should be able to see them. If you can't see them, let me know. All right, so y'all are all over the place. Generally, we've got 3s, 4s, a couple of 2s. Why can't I? Okay, let me just share this one more time. That was weird. Some of you guys are really stressed about this unit. I get it. There's a lot to know in this unit, so I get that it's definitely a stressful unit, but I got you, and we're going to actually cover this twice. So this is like unit 4, part 1, and then we'll do part 2 next Tuesday. So there's a lot to cover here. And the other reason why I think there's some stress around this unit in particular is because it's a lot of like history. Like if you know world history, this will like you're almost like better off because there's a lot of like historical content in here. So lucky for you, I'm a history teacher. So I'm gonna cover a lot of that stuff tonight. So even if you feel like I don't know it and I'm not sure how to know it, I got you. So give me an emoji in the chat that is something about this unit, something about unit 4, and then I'm gonna jump in and get going. So if you give me that emoji, that's how I know that you're ready to go. You're like, I'm taking notes. I'm super ready. I want any emoji that has to do with unit 4. So maps, territories, boundaries, globalization, anything really. All right, I'm waiting for a few of you to answer with an emoji that has to do with unit 4. I'm hoping that I didn't freeze or anything, that you can still hear me. There we go. Lily wins first emoji. Oh, nice. I got a map. I got a snake. I have a screaming face. Is that America? I don't think that. I'm not sure if that's America. I'm trying to look. An alien. Unreal. All right, let's jump in. So, first things first, we've got types of states. So, we're going to cut through a bunch of pieces. We're going to talk about types of states, types of boundaries, historical events that affected the political map. So just remember that basically this is just all about the political map. So when you're thinking about political maps, you need to think about, I should have put like one map in here, essentially like any map that shows states, right? So also something to just keep in mind, when I say the word state, I basically mean country. I don't mean like, Wisconsin. In the United States, we have states that are part of our country, and that's just how we operate because we have a federal government with other states. But in this case, when I say state, I mean country. So please don't get confused. I'm talking about different types of countries. So what are the different types of states that exist? So there are nation states. A nation state is essentially a singular nation with a shared culture that has a state. They have a country, right? So for example, Japan, right? In Japan, most people live, there is a country for Japan, and most people that live in Japan are of Japanese culture. They speak Japanese. They, have a shared history, shared religion. They share the different cultural aspects. Same thing with France, right? In France, most people that live in France have the shared French culture. Iceland, 94% of the people who live in Iceland are, I think, something like that, speak Icelandic. So nation states are countries where everyone in the country is basically the same culture, right? It's like one culture. Whereas multinational states are countries that have more than one nation within it, right? So this is where it gets confusing, right? So like when we're saying nation, I mean, I'm almost referring to the people. And when I'm saying state, I'm referring to the country. So a multinational state would be a country that has more than one groups of people in it. So something like the United States, Canada, Australia, right? There isn't like one language that we all speak. Of course, we speak English, but it's not even our official language. There's a lot of languages spoken here. Another one would be a multi-state nation. So this is where people, like one nation, one group of people lives in many states. So like Korea, right? The Korean peoples are split between North and South Korea. There's 2 states for one group of people. Same thing with Hungary. Most people that live in Hungary, most Hungarians live in Hungary, but many of them also live in other parts of Transylvania. And so they're across several different countries. So multi-state nations is referring to the actual groups of people. And then the last one here is stateless nations. So these are groups of people without a country. So like Palestinians, Kurds, the Basque people, these nations of people don't have an official state. They don't have a country, right? So they have regions where they live, where they're, they're what's the word? There's places where they are, but they don't necessarily have an official country, right? The Kurds live in parts of Afghanistan, parts of other different places. Exactly, right? Like Kurdistan is not actually a country. If it were to become a country, then it would become a nation state, right? Because it would be a country made up of mostly Kurds, right? If Palestine were to be admitted as a country, if there were to be a two-state solution of Israel and Palestine, then Palestine would become a nation state, right? A country for Palestinians. Can I re-explain multi-state nations? So multi-state nations so one more time. Let me go run through it one more time. Nation state is, before I run through it, when I say nation, I'm really referring to the people. It's like a group of an ethnic group of people. When I'm saying state, I'm referring to a country. So a nation state is a country with one major group of people that lives there, right? Japan, France, Iceland are really good examples. There's a lot of nation states, but these are good examples of countries with one majority of ethnic group of people. Multinational states is a country with more than one nation, right? The United States, Canada, Australia. Even just think of it as like, in the United States, there are hundreds of different Native American tribes. Each of those tribes are their own nations. You have the Cherokee, you have the Iroquois, you have the Apache, or you have all these different groups of people, and we all live in the United States. So the United States is a multinational state, right? There's many different nations within this one state. Multi-state nations are when there's one group of people that lives across many different states, like Korea. So Koreans live in North and South Korea, right? And there's obvious political differences between the two, but the people themselves have a shared history, a shared culture. They are Korean, right? So Koreans are multi-state. It's a multi-state nation. There's two states, even though there's one group of people. Ireland would be another similar one, right? Where you have this division of people where in the north, they actually are part of the UK, and in the south, they're in their own state of Ireland. But Irish people, they're the same, right? They have the same shared culture, the same shared languages, even though they live in two different states. Stateless nations are people without a state. They do not have an official state, right? Palestinians, Kurds, Basques. I know this is like one of those things that's just confusing because we keep saying the same word over and over again. And it's just how it's organized and how it's, it's just literally like it's the same word over and over again, right? With like a couple of different differences. But when you think of it this way, just think of nation as the group of people and think of state as the actual country, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm hoping that made sense. If it doesn't make sense still, spend some time on this slide with yourself, think of different examples. I'm glad that this explanation worked for a lot of you. Okay, so we're gonna jump into evolutions of the map. And this is where things are gonna get a little bit more challenging. So just to kind of start at the top, you know what I'm going to do actually is instead of showing all of this at once, I wonder if that will do it by, it probably won't. Yeah, sometimes teachers definitely make things more it's just going to show the whole thing. Worth it though, right? Okay, so let me just start at the top. I'll turn the little pointer on. So I'm sorry there's like a bunch of stuff on the slide at once, but we're going to spend some time here, okay? So I promise I won't go too fast. And please ask questions. If they're quick questions, just put them in the chat and I'll answer them just as I'm going. Okay, so our political map has changed a lot over time, right? If you look at an example of, actually, I'm going to close this and reshare my, boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Reshare my screen so that I can have other tabs going. So if you look at a map of the world in 1800, it's going to look way different than it does now, right? The way that countries have organized themselves have changed over time. It's sometimes kind of shocking, So for example, this is just the world in 1800. So, obviously this isn't, relatively speaking, this isn't all that long ago, but it looks vastly different than what the world looks like today, right? You can see Africa looks totally different. The countries of Africa are not defined. South America looks totally different. I mean, look at the United States. You have Spain and France and England up here. You have, look at I wonder how much we can zoom in. If you look at Europe, I mean, Europe is great. Look at Europe. This is crazy. Like basically Germany had all these tiny little places where people kind of governed, You have, India is totally different, right? You can see the division of people. Even Australia doesn't exist yet. So the actual political map has changed a lot, and it can change pretty dramatically for a lot of different reasons, right? And that's basically what I'm going to talk through right now, is what has changed over time that has affected the actual map. Why have things changed? So first, the actual concept of the nation state didn't exist until the 1500s to 1800s and in different places. So remember, nation state means one nation, one state, right? So if you look at this map, even just how things are labeled are not quite aligned to nation states, right? You have, in some cases you have France, you have Spain, you have Brazil, although Brazil wouldn't necessarily be a nation state, but you have the beginnings of these things, right? But you don't have them everywhere. So as certain people, as the concept of the nation state takes on, that starts to influence people to then organize, right? Why not? Why not change the boundaries? Does this Ottoman Empire mean that everyone within this empire has shared culture? For sure not. And so there's all these different forces that then lead people to change the boundaries. So this alone, just the idea that there could be a nation state, is what leads to things like the French Revolution, right? Where France really just becomes more of its own independent state. Other things affect that too. The unification of Germany and Italy, right? So remember, if you look at this, you can see Italy is not a state yet. You have all these smaller states. You can see Germany, which is right here, is a ton of small states. So what happens is the idea of the nation state comes up. So these leaders begin to organize. They begin to collect their people into one state to unify. So Germany does that. Italy does that in the 1800s. Those are some examples of how the map has evolved. Another major force is nationalism. Nationalism is basically when it's the actual force that makes a nation want to create their own state. So first there's like the idea that they can, and then there's the will to want to, right? So in this case, like why would you want to create a nation state? Because it can protect you from external threats, right? We all speak the same language, we all have shared religion. Why not just like come together, right? Or we are part of we're one people, so let's come together and create one state. So there's different forces of why you would want to create a nation state, and then there's a lot of examples of that. So for example, Mexico is united by Roman Catholicism. It's just the shared religion. Estonia starts to become united over their fear of Russia. So, as smaller states, if we're afraid of Russia, then let's become one state, because actually we share a lot of the same religions and languages. So let's band together, right? Japan sharing the common language. So if you look at Japan wasn't quite, Japan in its current state. So that's like one example. Estonia is up here. Estonia was part of Prussia. And so that would be another example of a country that like forms a nation state because of that. And then of course, Mexico, right? You have, there's other forces too in terms of colonization, but why does Mexico become a state with the current borders that we have? Part of that is language. Part of that is other types of shared histories. And then, of course, the shared religion. Okay, a third force here is colonialism. So we've talked a little bit about this in terms of colonialism and like imperialism, but this is like maybe one of the most important forces to know, to understand in terms of in human geography, even because it affects everything. So essentially what happened is Europeans went and took control of other lands, right? This is a predominantly European thing that happened, where Europe then went and took land, sometimes by force, sometimes through like civil war, sometimes the ruler of the lands they were taking would come to an agreement, would make a deal. But either way, they took control of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And that dramatically changes the map. Okay, so the Berlin Conference is one of those reasons. So let's just like look at this for a second. So the Berlin Conference was, if you just picture this for a second, this is what Africa looked like in 1800. Okay, so at the beginning of the 19th century, there was some colonization that was happening. You had Portugal, you had Great Britain, you had Spain, you had, I'm not sure, I don't think France was in on it yet. Maybe some, the Dutch. So you had starting in the 1500s, in the 1600s, into the 1700s, you have Europe coming into Africa, especially on the coasts, right? Setting up these port cities. And then you get, after Germany unites, Germany is now going to try to catch up. So, it takes several decades, but they're going to try to catch up because now Britain is already out there. They have, Britain has South Africa. That would be like one of their main ones. Portugal has like a ton of area. This was like Angola. So Germany is going to try to catch up. And as a result, there's like this mad dash, right? It's basically like, here's a whole continent for the taking, go get it. And of course, this is done completely without the consent of Africans. So they literally had rulers from these European states meet together, and they sat down around a map of Africa and they divided it all up between themselves. They didn't take into account anything about, there was no African rulers there. They didn't take into account anything regarding like African culture, language, religion, anything. It didn't matter. It was just divided up. And so this is what you got. Let's do this one. This is the map. Oh, how many times do I have to click this for it to just open? So this was basically the map of Africa once you have, after the Berlin Conference. So Belgium is in on it, Germany is in on it, Italy comes in on it now that they are connected, right? The only place that's really left is Ethiopia and I believe Liberia. So why do they do it? There's a few reasons why. One is because they want natural resources, things like right in the center here in the Congo, something like rubber was very present there. And so rubber, then it's this natural resource that you can then create other things with. Other things like diamonds, other types of natural resources that then allowed the industrial nations in Europe to create more stuff. So having more power over places meant that you got their materials. You could enslave their people and get a ton of natural resources. You could then sell products to their people or force them to buy them from you. And the way that you would do that is that you would limit any other imports. So like you can prevent people from buying goods from other countries. They have to buy it from yours. So that's why, right? It's money, it's power, it's greed. There's also like a religious aspect of it too, to Christianize Africa first. So this is a huge, huge deal because like these lines are so arbitrary. Like, first of all, straight lines is a completely made up thing. The fact that you can draw a straight line, like, do you think people actually live along straight borders? Of course not, right? It's just, there's a reason for that. It's really easy to draw up straight lines and say, whoop, whoop, you get this, I get this. But it has nothing to do with the people. It's not drawn along tribal lines. It's not drawn sometimes even along like geographic lines. So it's totally made up. And today, from this moment on, conflict in Africa is common because of this. Because if you say, I'm going to draw this line around these people, and this is going to be Sudan, and the British are gonna be in charge of Sudan. Well, the problem is this goes around more than one nation of people that don't necessarily have anything in common. They don't share the same religion. They don't speak the same languages. They don't have the same shared history. So you're now forcing people to be a part of one nation, be a part of one state, even though they have nothing in common. That's how you get conflict. And that's exactly what happened in Sudan. And so in Sudan, exactly, right? So they created these multi-nation states without the consent of the people and without any understanding of those nations. And so in a lot of places, they forced two groups of people to be a part of the same state, even if they didn't get along. They could have been in tribal warfare for centuries. And the British just kind of said, nope, you're all part of the same place now. So tons of conflict arises because of this. And it still happens all the time because a lot of these boundaries are the same boundaries that we have today. It's broken up a lot more today, but some of them are the exact same. And so that's a problem. Okay, so moving forward. So that's colonialism, right? Colonialism is going to create all kinds of different boundaries around people. Decolonization is basically the opposite. This is now when people start fighting for their independence. And this is mostly in the 20th century. So especially after World War II, what you start to see are all these countries that used to be colonies. Now, they had been pushing for their independence for a long time. But after World War II, the European countries can't afford to keep them anymore. One of the best examples of that is like Vietnam. Vietnam was a colony of France, and then France was hit very, very hard in World War II. And so they didn't have a lot of money to then keep Vietnam as a colony. Like, it takes a lot of money because now you need to control them. You need to put down any type of, uprising. And so Vietnam takes advantage of this. France is weak, so Vietnam strikes. So civil war breaks out in Vietnam, and it lasts for like 15 years. But eventually the French lose, and Vietnam becomes its own country. It becomes an independent country. And part of that is because and then right after, as soon as they win the Civil War, that's when you get the US getting involved, because the guy that led that rebellion, that led that charge to freedom, was a communist, right? That's Ho Chi Minh. And so now you have America like freaking out because they don't want Vietnam to be communist. So then you get the Vietnam War, and the US is involved. Exactly. War right after a war. Yeah. So decolonization, it happens in all across the world. Some of the examples would be India, Algeria. There's a huge Algerian civil war to push out the French. Egypt, Vietnam, all of these countries are going to be fighting for their independence. Another layer of this is just civil war and genocide. So, like we talked about, the way that boundaries were created during colonialism had nothing to do with the people. So there's tons and tons of conflict. Sudan would be an example of this, of a country that split, not that long ago. It split in like 2007, I think. And so, that's an example of the map changing because of civil war. Another example would be ethnic cleansing. So, you guys were kind of talking about India here. So India used to be the Marathas right here. This was a kingdom within India. It's like a dynasty almost. And southern India was always sort of independent, and Great Britain had control over it for a long time. But then eventually what you had is once India became Once India became its own country, you actually had this push for a two-state solution in India, because India is mostly Hindu, whereas Pakistan, the people up here, and notice that if you look at this old map, there is no like Pakistan, right? You can see Sikhs, right? Sikhs were another group. Sikh is essentially Hinduism and Islam combined. And then you have this other group here, and this would have been mostly Muslim. And so as India becomes their own state, at first it was the whole thing. And then you actually have this breakup start to happen. So Bangladesh is then created, Pakistan is created, and Pakistan was meant to be the Muslim state, whereas India would be the Hindu state. And what they literally enforced was then people to move. So if you lived here and you were Hindu, you got to go. You're going to go to India. And part of it is like, you got to go because you're not safe anymore. If you live here and you're Muslim, you got to go. And so what happened is, as soon as India was independent, you had this mass migration of people from India that are from India that are Muslim going to Pakistan, and from Pakistan that are Hindu going to India. And the conflict between them was unbelievable. And so you literally had millions of people die because of that clash. They killed each other as they went by. Other people killed them as they went by. So things like that, it's insanely violent, but it changes the map, right? It's just another example that changes the map. Would India be considered a nation state? No, I wouldn't say so, because India is a pretty massive area that actually there's a lot of groups of people that live there. You know, you can see how there's like all these different, this is like the best way to look at it, because you can see all these different groups of people, you know. If the whole world were all nation states, countries would be much smaller, right? Because there would just be this smaller group of people that all have the same background. Okay. Last thing on here is the Cold War. So in terms of the Cold War, you basically get these two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, and then they start to take control of other places because they want to enforce their dominance, their influence. So when I say take control, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as colonialism. This is one form of control. This was another form of control. For the Soviet Union, in some cases, that meant literally taking control. You know, tanks are rolling in and you are mine now. All right, I'll use this as an example. So in this case, so you can see like the Soviet Union was massive, right? And what they did right after World War II is they marched right into Eastern Europe, this area over here. And they took it, right? They took it. It was the Germans, the Nazis were here, and then as soon as they pushed literally like the Soviets liberated these areas from the Nazis, and then as they did that, they were marching towards Berlin, and they took control of those areas, and they didn't give it up for decades. So if you lived here, if you lived in Poland, and then the Soviets came in, and then the Nazis came in, and then the Soviets came back. So you like were taken over a bunch of times. But all of this became the Soviet Union. And then by the time the Soviet Union actually broke up in 1991, all of these states then became independent, right? So that's a whole bunch of new states that were then added because the Soviet Union broke up. So the red here is Russia, and everything else is a different state, right? I think this is Kazakhstan. You know, you have all these other states in kind of like northern Middle East, right? And then you have the Eastern European states. So this is a massive force, right? That's exactly what happened. The other piece of it too is just like the proxy war. So we kind of talked about Vietnam, but basically proxy wars are like the US and the Soviet Union never actually fought each other because they both had nukes. And so if they fought each other, then they would have ended the world. They couldn't fight each other. So instead, what they would do is they would fund conflicts that happen in other parts of the world. So like Korea, North versus South Korea, you know, you have this Korean War, and then you have the Russians that are funding the North and the US that are funding the South. So it's actually Russia or Soviet Union versus US, but they're never actually firing shots at each other. They're doing it through the Koreans. Same in Vietnam, same in Afghanistan. And this is like Afghanistan war in the 80s, not the current one. Yugoslavia is another even more specific example. This is a balkanization. So if you look at this 14 right here, this is Yugoslavia, which when the Soviet Union broke up was one country. And then the leader of Yugoslavia died. His name was Tito. And as soon as that happened, several more countries were then created. So then you got Bosnia, Serbia's here, Croatia. What is this country? Slovenia, Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo. So there's like a bunch of other countries in here. So things just this is devolution, right? We're going to talk more about these forces next week or on Tuesday. Yeah. So, but this is essentially that, right? How the map changes has to do with history. So you should know these as examples. And I kind of took a long time explaining some of them, but I think it's really worth it because this unit is just so much rooted in what happens politically, and these are the political events. The one question around, let me just look at the questions that you got here. All right, I'll go back to those. All right, moving on. Concepts of political power. So these are basically some of the theories, the models that exist in Unit 4 that explain who is the most powerful, right? So, and why do states expand? So the first is organic theory. This is essentially the idea that states have to expand in order for like nourishment. So the states have the right to expand, and they will, and they will keep doing it because they need more people, more resources. And that is what the Nazis used to expand. The Nazis actually had a ton of Nazi map. They occupied a huge region of the world. So you can see here, like this is what Europe looked like with how far the Nazis were able to spread, and their whole thinking was we need this living room, this Lebensraum, this living space, and so that is connected to this organic theory here. The other piece of this too is the heartland and rimland theory. So these are basically just like theories thinking about who has the most power in the world and where can you, if you dominate different regions, where would be the best place to dominate? So the first one is the heartland. It's really only talking about Eurasia, right? So this like massive land mass of Europe and Asia. It's really not caring at all about the Americas or Africa or Australia. But this idea is that if you control the heartland, if this is your area, then you are going to be the most powerful because you're going to have a lot of territory, a lot of people, a lot of natural resources like coal, and you have a lot of protection from the navies, right? It's really, really hard to then attack you. The other idea is the rimland theory, and this is the opposite. This is basically saying, forget the center. What you really want is the outside, the rim of Eurasia. If you control the rim, then you have access to the sea. And if you have access to the sea, then you can trade, you can then dominate the rest of the world, right? Who cares? So this is basically sort of Russia, right? And the other like parts of China and some of the former Soviet Union satellite states. And the rest of it is everything else. And so the idea is sort of like, it's just this competing theory of just who has the most domination in the world. And one would be here, one would be here. Yeah. All right, types of boundaries. So obviously the map changes a lot, but what are the different ways that we actually draw boundaries? Like, how does this work? One would be defined. This is like, there's literally legal documents that establish this boundary. It is a defined boundary. We agree on it. Didn't mean to go back. So in terms of a defined boundary, you've got, think about like, Canada and America, Mexico and America. Those are defined boundaries. We know those lines. They exist on a map. They also exist in legal documents that specifically say this is America, this is Mexico. Another version would be delimited boundaries. This is just like less official. So the line might be drawn on the map and it's going to show you like the limits of a space, but it's not necessarily any type of like legal established. So in this case, an example would be more like, especially like boundaries in the sea, boundaries that are just kind of more agreed upon that aren't necessarily like super official, especially like more like local. Another one would be demarcated. So in this case, it's like it's not necessarily on the map, and it may not even be like a very official line, but there's a physical object, there's some kind of sign or wall that determines this boundary, and that's where like things are different. So in this case, it's like, I don't know. This is definitely more like of a local thing, right? So you've got a fence up, and that's going to kind of define out where your lawn starts and where your neighbor's lawn starts, something like that. The other types of boundaries, natural. So rivers and mountains are always types of boundaries. Sometimes they're official. Like if you just look at, now we have so many maps open and none of these are what I want. Political map. If you just look at a political map, sometimes there are boundaries that are on river, even just in the US, right? The Mississippi River goes straight through the middle of the country. The line that defines where Arkansas and Tennessee are divided is a river, right? We've decided that river is going to become a defined boundary, but it's a natural boundary. You get to the river and if I cross this river, I'm now in Tennessee. So things can be more than one, right? So natural boundaries can be defined. Another one is geometric. This is just like a straight line. There's no real reason for why we have that boundary. It's just a straight line. So even in our country, right? Colorado, New Mexico and Arizona, there's no reason for why that's the line. That was just the line, right? You get to that boundary and it says now leaving Arizona. Africa is also a perfect example of where you see this a lot. Tons and tons of straight boundaries that exist that have no reason to be there. And then the last one is cultural. So there can be divisions based on culture, even like agriculture in this case. So, when you think about if you've ever flown across the country and you can see these like squares, of agriculture where like things are different, sometimes that draws this like boundary. And a lot of times that's a really straight boundary, but it's straight and it's, people on this side maybe grow wheat and people on this side grow rice. Things like that. So these are your types of boundaries. Okay, so we've got a couple more things to talk about. One being voting districts, federal and unitary, and then lastly is the shapes of states. Are we doing okay? Can I get an emoji or something so I know you're alive? Something that shows, I don't know, that brings good juju to the group. Some kind of like uplifting, some kind of like uplifting and motivating emoji. Anything. An alien? Y'all are tripping. I'm like, help each other out. She throws an alien in there. I'm dead. Thumbs up. The struggles are real. I know. Ooh. Painting nails. Something I should do soon. All right. So voting districts and gerrymandering. If you watch the news at all right now or in the last 10 years, you've probably heard something about gerrymandering. It's a very, very big part of why our country is what it is right now. This is a state-by-state issue. And in states that have Republican governors, this has been exploited. So the idea is essentially voting districts matter, right? You vote for your congressional representatives through your district. There are also local districts. And it matters because it is grouping up people in different ways to then be able to vote for who you want to represent. So this is an example of North Carolina. You can find a ton of examples of gerrymandering. Maryland has like a crazy map. Pennsylvania used to have a crazy map, and there's a bunch of them. So has it been exploited by Democrats though? For sure, right? So like the idea of gerrymandering is basically that you're going to draw the lines on the map to basically make the minority group have less voting power. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. In this scenario, this is something that is very, very much in the Republican toolbox that has been exploited. So generally, Democrats are on the side of like making things more equal, like making representatives actually represent the people that they are voted to represent. Whereas in the other side of this, it's meant to then like take over. So the parties don't work together to redraw them because they have different goals, right? Republicans want Republicans to win, Democrats want Democrats to win. So the lines on the map matter. So take a look at this. In 2010, this is what North Carolina looked like. These were the districts. First of all, think of how ridiculous this is. Look at this. Look at this one here. Look at this one that goes all the way. My pointer is red. But look at this blue district that goes all the way down up in here, and it's connected up here. The shape of it, just the shape of it is ridiculous, right? Because like normally you would think, in terms of voting districts, it would make sense to just take the state and cut it up evenly, right? If I have one state and I just say, okay, I'm just going to like line, here you go. But if you're trying to make sure that there are who's in power is then going to decide where these lines are because they can change who's going to get voted. So in this case, you can see 2010 in terms of Democratic redistricting. This is what it looked like. So you can see all the blue that exists. So this is the perfect example. This entire district over here, this Eastern North Carolina district that was blue. And then they bordered this other district that was red. In 2012, the Republicans redistricted the whole state. And by doing that, it's not that these people became more, conservative, but this district was combined, right, with these other people up here, which made it that more people were voting red than the people who before had voted blue. And so they basically got eaten up, right? So instead of getting a blue representative here, they got one red representative, right? You can see the same thing happening here. This one was combined, right? This used to be two, one red, one blue, and then it's shifted. It's shifted entirely, right? Like there's a whole new line, and now there's less. So you can see how you can have an effect. Because if there are, let's just literally say there are, 100 people, and there's 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats. Theoretically, if you want to make it really fair, you draw the line somewhere in between them, because typically they live in different places too, and then you get one Democratic and one Republican representative. But if you shape the line differently and you spiral it around and about, and you make it so that 70% of the Democrats live in one area, and I don't know, you can divide it out in a different way so that actually when they vote, it's going to end up being two Republican, right? So maybe instead of being 50 and 50, it's 30-20, 30-20, 30, I don't know, 30-25. You can mess with this. There's actually a game that you can play that I highly recommend playing. Let me just find it really quick. gerrymandering game. So if you want to play around with this so that you can see what I'm talking about here, this is called the redistricting game. And it basically gives you a fake town, and you have a certain amount of people, and they are Republican or they are Democrat, and you have to then redistrict in order to provide for different people. It's super cool. One other piece of this, just to really keep in mind, one of the reasons why this is so dangerous is that a lot of the ways that these redistricting happen are actually around racial lines. And so rather than letting like Black communities then have the power to vote in Black representatives, they split the Black community into two, and then they're now part of these larger, maybe white communities who then vote in white representatives who don't necessarily care about the Black communities that they're serving. And so even though there could have been one Black district with potentially Black representatives, instead you split them, and now you're basically just taking power away from people. So exactly. This is a type of voter suppression where you can then you take away the power people have and the number of representatives that they have and the voting power that they have by drawing different lines. And that then makes things unequal. So like one of the reasons that we're in the situation right now that we're in is because of this, because of redistricting. It's just not done in any type of fair way. So highly recommend playing that game, the redistricting game. It's addicting, so good luck. Okay, so we're definitely gonna go over time a little bit, but a couple more pieces on this. Federal versus unitary states. There was an entire FRQ with this concept. Basically, the idea is that a unitary state has like one national government. There's no like local state governments that also operate. Instead, you just have like one government. Whereas a federal government, there's a federal national government, and then there's also local governments. So all the green countries on here are federal states. So the US is the perfect example. We have a national government, right? That is in DC. That's the president, the Congress, the Senate. They are making decisions for the country. But then we also have our state governments. We have governors, we have state legislators, we have the entire 3 branches of government exist at the top in the federal government, in the one for the whole country, but it also exists in every single state. So every single one of your states has a Supreme Court, has a governor, has a state legislator. So it's like we have mini governments and a bigger government. That is federalism, where it's divided out like that. It's spread out, and it's done on purpose to give states some power and to give the country itself some power. Whereas like in France or in Italy, these are places that are unitary governments, that there's just like the French government. They don't have states or provinces. They have just the state. There's just the federal government. I'm sorry, I'm saying the same word over and over again. They just have the country's government. One thing to note is that typically countries that are nation states, that have one nation, are unitary, right? It's much easier because you have one group of people. There isn't like a majority minority situation. There's one group of people, so there's one government. Whereas countries that are multi-nation typically are federal because different people need power. So that's a perfect example of it. Is if you took a map of all nation states and you overlaid it, you would see that they are basically the same. Exactly. So the unitary government controls everything, right? So just imagine it in the U.S. if we had a president and we had Congress with the Senate, and we had a Supreme Court, but there were no governors. They made the decisions for everybody, right? There was no governor or there was no mayor. Whereas that's what a unitary government would look like. The other thing is that a lot of times the really big countries are federal because it's just really hard to manage that many people. You kind of need to split it up and say, okay, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. This person will be in charge of all of you, right? And so they'll meet with you, you'll meet with your people, and we'll kind of do it like that, right? It's more bureaucratic. Whereas if you just have one president or one prime minister, it's a lot harder. So in this case, the size of the country matters, and the organization of people, if there's more than one nation within there. Okay. I'm mad that this one little one didn't show up. So types of boundaries, these are basically the shapes of states. One is compact. These are basically all your countries that are rounded. The distance from the center is about the same everywhere. They're kind of circular. It's really easy to travel and to communicate with everybody because it's just around. It's one shape. Elongated are just like literally stretched out. So some places are kind of isolated. It's hard to travel up and down because it's long. And it's also hard to govern and defend because how easy would it be for an enemy to just take this part, and now those people are on their own. Exactly. So this is Poland. This is Chile. Japan is a little bit different because Japan has islands too. But another example would be prorupted. This is Thailand. So a prorupted state is kind of like a compact state. Like if the boundary had just been right here, this would have been a compact state. But because there's this extra little like tail, it's prorupted. It's almost like it exploded out. And because of that, there's similar challenges to these two, right? Because it kind of has both, right? You have this nice area right here, but then you also have this longer area. This is supposed to say elongated. Another example would be a perforated state, which is a state that literally has another state within it. So South Africa is maybe the best example because this right here is Lesotho, and that's an entirely other state that's within South Africa. So there's a high level of dependency within that, right? Like they are dependent on South Africa for defense, right? They can't, if South Africa is invaded, then you have this like weird piece, that you have to defend. And Italy is another example, right? Because Vatican and San Marino are they're anywhere there's like microstates. These just like microstates that exist. Fragmented is when it's totally scattered. So really any island nations. This is Indonesia. Japan is another example of a fragmented state. What else would be an example? Really like anything in the Pacific, where there's just things are scattered. Tons of challenges, right? How do you get resources to people? How do you make sure that they're, communication? Obviously, with technology, things get a whole lot easier, but that's basically the issue there. So these are your 5 general parts of states, and there are what are those other things? Someone asked about landlocked, enclave. Yeah. An enclave is just like, it's that landlocked country right there would be an enclave. All right, let's jump into some questions. Woo! It's a lot of stuff, I know. Can I please upload the study guides for Unit 4? Yes, I promise I will. It has been written, and then I need to go in and edit it tonight, so we'll get that uploaded today. It's just been crazy writing so many study guides. We've uploaded study guides. We've uploaded like almost 1,000 different articles just in the last few weeks, and it's been wild. So I apologize that Unit 4 is not up, but I promise you it will be. Okay, what's the difference between balkanization and devolution? I'm gonna be honest, I get a little confused too. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna double check. I believe, if anyone knows the answer, please say it. I believe that the difference is in terms of which direction it's going. I think that balkanization is coming together. I think I'm going to talk more about this next week, but let's find the answer. I guess I could just Google it. I'm just showing you that sometimes I don't know the answer either. Balkanization versus devolution. Okay, devolution can lead to balkanization or can be as a result. Central government still retains. Okay. All right. So basically, so essentially, devolution is the thing that happens first, where an area would then come away from another area. So, for example, anywhere in like, I'll use the Balkans as an example in former Yugoslavia, but essentially devolution is when you have a region that is going to become independent from another region. The next step of that would be balkanization, where they're then going to actually become their own independent states. So it's sort of like a step ladder where you have devolution it's not necessarily more gradually or suddenly. It's more like devolution is the first step, where this region is now going to become, it is kind of breaking away from this other space, but it's not necessarily an independent area yet. Whereas balkanization is more about becoming like independent official states. So it's kind of like a step. One leads to the other. Do we have to remember all evolution examples ever? So I would just know them. I would know as many as you can. It's, like I kind of always told you guys, like, it's a lot to know. And so you're not going to be able to like sit and memorize all of it, but you don't know what's going to be on the test, So your best bet is to have a little bit about a lot of things. And that will cover you the most, where you can actually then like, if anything comes up in that chapter, then you can talk more about it. Are there many immigrants in France? Yes. So something to keep in mind about nation states, it's kind of an old it's not a perfect science. It's not a perfect thing. It's, in France, there are plenty of people that live in France that are not like ethnically French. I don't know how you would describe it. They're like, even for example, from Algeria used to be a French colony. And once they became independent, there was a lot of migration that happened between Algeria and between France. And so you have a ton of people who live in France who are of Algerian culture. They are, Muslim, they are Black, but they also speak French because they were part of a French colony. So it's kind of this like weird thing, you know. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's not, you know, they are French. Um, that's the best way I can answer it. Yes, there are immigrants. There are plenty of immigrants in France. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Look at this appreciation for Fiveable. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're like grinding. The grind is real. I mean, we're just, I don't know, we're uploading a ton of stuff, creating a lot of stuff. Olympics will start next week, so we've been spending a lot of time developing that, putting that together. I think, all right, let me just answer a couple more questions. And then I want to talk a little bit about suggestions for the exam, because some of you guys were kind of talking about notes and stuff. So I want to talk about that for a second. But really quick, how can districts be combined if the goal is to get an even population throughout? So the goal is not fairness, right? It depends on who's in charge. The goal is to continue staying in power. So you can create however many districts you want, and you know, that is how things will be. So for example, you can have the census determines how many representatives that each state will get. So, you know, the census is happening right now because it's 2020. It happens every 10 years. And so what happens is, like, after this census, then if the population of your state is much higher than it used to be, then you'll get another representative. So there'll be a new one. But you can then change how like where those districts are. You know, you're going to have to, so you have the map. Let's say you had 6 districts before and now you have to add a 7th. Where do you add it? Do you change the lines of all of them? Do you add it right in the middle of one? You know, where do you put it? So you can change it, and all the districts don't necessarily have to be even either. They usually be close, but they don't have to be even. How does the census work? It's online now, which is, thank God, because otherwise. So the census happens online, and they are going to count. The idea is essentially to count everyone in the country. How many Americans are there? How many people live in the state of Wisconsin? How many people live in Milwaukee? How many people live in this specific neighborhood that I live? And all of that determines funding for schools, for parks, for other types of, you know, infrastructure and resources, for anything, economic resources, for anything like that. So even just think about it, like right now with COVID, you know, governors are getting certain types of funding based on how many people live there, but that data is based on the 2010 census. So if there's more people that live there now, then the resources are going to run out. So it's really, really important that we count everybody, that we know how many people actually live there. So here's one piece of homework for you. Ask your parents if they have filled out the census yet. And if they haven't, they can do it online, and make sure that they do it so that they are counted, that you are counted, right? So that it matters. So the question around, like, does it take into account homeless people? It does. It for sure does. It should. But the challenge is counting people who don't have access to internet, or who don't know that the census is happening, right? There's a lot of education that has to happen, right? That's why you're seeing ads, because it's so, so, so important that we count people correctly. So actually there's a lot of organizing that has to happen to then make sure everyone gets counted. You know, like people knocking on doors, people call. I mean, now we have to call people, and even that, it's not going to be perfect, you know? So this is why it's so important. So anyone you know in your life, you should ask them, did you fill out the census yet? And you keep wanting to, like, spread the news, because it's so important, especially anyone that you know in your family, you know, extended family, or anyone that may not know that the census is happening, because you really want to make sure that they get counted, right? Like, because there are resources that may not be provided for them later on if they're not actually, like, if we don't know that they're there. Okay, so it's by family. So basically what will happen is your parents will fill it out, or who you live with will fill it out, and they will count you. So they basically count the family unit. So you have to count everybody. So if there's a baby, even if they were just born, you count them. And that's what's important. So you were most likely counted on your parents' census, and typically one adult per family would fill it out. Okay, so just to really quick talk about the test. So I know that it's open note. I know that you can use things, but I just want to like highly, highly recommend that you don't go into the exam relying on that. First of all, when you take the test, you want to basically have one window open, close every other tab, and only that window. Do not open up another tab for Google or for any other resource that you have. If I were you, I would not do that, because one of the ways that College Board has said that they are tracking cheating is that they can basically tell if you are Googling things. How that technology works, I don't know. And they're not going to say, because they don't want you to know how it works. Because if you know how it works, then you can go around it. So with that, don't take any chances. You're here, you're doing the work, you know the material, you can pass this test. You don't need to cheat on the test to pass. And if you do, then you won't be able to get the points for all the hard work that you did. So it's like, it's not worth it. I would not take any risk here, because this is totally new territory and none of us really know how it's going to work. And so I would recommend that you don't push it. I don't think it's coming through cameras. I think it's more of a tracker on what you're actually doing on your computer. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I wouldn't communicate with anyone. Like, I would just assume that Big Brother is watching. I know that just like sounds really stressful and I don't know what to do with it, but I would just, I just wouldn't take any, there's just no point. You know this, you're going to go in prepared. Right. Pretend as if it were a normal year where you can't have notes with you. So, okay. So with that said, that's internet. Don't try to Google stuff. Don't keep, Fiveable open. Don't do any of that. Just close out everything and take the test. When it comes to actually like books and notes, they can't track whether or not you're looking at those things. That's why they told you that it's open note, because they can't keep a track. They have no idea. This is a physical book. They don't know if I'm going to open this book or not. In a classroom setting, they can make sure that you don't. But when you're at home, like they don't know. So you get to use your notes. You get to use a book. With that said, these questions, FRQs, are not really like, they're going to be really, really hard to look up the answer. Think about it. Think about every FRQ that you've ever said before, you ever written. It's not like it's just multiple choice where it's like, go find the answer. It's going to take you a minute. And the problem is that you're timed. So you've got 25 minutes for one FRQ and 15 minutes for the other. That time is going to go by really, really fast. So how I would recommend that you do this is literally like make yourself one piece of paper that is, basically your cheat sheet, for lack of better words. And that's where you might want to write down a few things just to make sure you remember them. Maybe you have a couple of things for unit 1, a couple of things for unit 2, whatever. And honestly, making that will help you study more than the sheet itself. And sure, keep that on your desk. That can be your notes that you're keeping open. Make it really organized so that it's really, really easy to find things when you want them. A book is going to be mostly useless to you because it takes too long to find it. So, you have that. I would also make sure you have just a blank piece of paper where you can just kind of write down your thoughts. You can quickly outline things, just like scratch paper. And then I just wouldn't waste time with anything else. You have those two things and then just take the test. Just do it. You're the biggest thing that could happen to you that would really suck is running out of time. You don't want to lose points on any of that. I would just have that. Don't even text anyone. I would turn your phone off. It's just not, I just don't think it's worth it. I think you can get this credit. I think you can get the college credit without any type of cheating. And it's just straight up not worth it because we just don't know how what it's gonna actually look like. So turn your phone off. Or just put it on a timer and put it on silent. And if anyone texts you, don't open it. Just don't even touch it. Yeah. So exactly. Look, this suggestion is like, open the FRQ, look at it, read it, and then use your scratch paper to write out some notes. If you need to look at other notes, fine, but you just like don't have time. 15 minutes to write an FRQ is very, very fast. So if you spend 5 minutes looking through notes trying to find the answer, you're going to waste a lot of time. Your best bet is to just answer it. Just do it. And then if you have some time at the end, then maybe you double check, then you just, okay. But double check like really, really specific things. If you're like, I really think I know when the Cold War happened, but I can't remember the exact year that it ended. And then maybe you're double checking. Maybe you take a guess, but then you're double checking. So I just wanted to like take a few minutes to talk about that because I know a lot of students are going to really try to game this. And on some level, I don't blame you. You're at home. It's a new test. Everyone's trying to figure out, how do I pass? The stakes are high. You want to pass. It's college credit. But I would just really, really, really have the confidence in yourself. You can do this. You will be prepared on test day. And then that's it. Just do it. You just take it. It's just none of the other stuff is worth it. You don't want to be the one kid that was caught. It's just not worth it because you're here, you're doing the work, you're showing up to CRAM sessions. And so if you end up getting caught by some stupid thing and then your credit doesn't count and you can't retake it, that's the worst because then it's like you put all this time in for what, So end rant, that's my suggestion. Have some confidence, y'all. You can do this. You will do it. I promise you. And we're going through all of it. We're gonna make sense of all of it. Yeah, do your freak out before. I get it. It's a lot. It's stressful. But for now, you'll be all right. So with that, I'll be back on Tuesday. And on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will talk a little bit more about Unit 4. So we have another whole section around globalization and supranationalism. Just a bunch of other layers of things. I will get the study guide uploaded tonight. I'm going to do it right now, I promise. And then I will send it out to you in all its glory. It'll be published. And yeah, that's about it. Play the redistricting game. Put it in there again. Oh man, it says I already sent the game. Play it tonight. You'll have fun. You'll see the challenges of gerrymandering. All right, I'm out. Appreciate y'all. Just take a minute every day and remind yourself that you can do this. Put a little Post-it up on your mirror. That's just like you got this. You can do this. And then you'll see it every single day and it'll just like remind yourself. One of the things that I almost put up a poster in my own room that just said like, trust yourself. Because I think that's like the hardest thing, right? Because you like want to feel like other people know it better than me, or I'm not an expert in this, or I'm not good at this, or I never understood this. It's all crap. Trust yourself. Just trust yourself, you know? You do know it. It's in you. You just gotta like you just have to know that you can do it. And so put that on your mirror. Trust yourself. See it every day, say it out loud, and I promise it will start to seep in. And then once you take the test, you're like, I got this. I super got this. Team AP hug Fiveable. All right. Yeah, big hugs to all the huggers, the AP huggers. I mean, it's AP hug after all. All right, my friends. See y'all later. Thank you for being awesome. And I will see you on the flip side. See you on Tuesday.